Of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you the history of our city and some of those that are really history makers. And today we're doing our history tape number 204, and we are very excited. We have a young man that has been a mover and shaker in Grand Prairie for long years, even though he's still a young man. And Mr. John Sellers, we're just so excited to welcome you to the set today.
Thank you, Ruthie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. John Michael Sellers. That's a real great tag. Then we want you to look out into your camera and bring us up to date with your genealogy. Give us your parents' names and just a sort of a beginning of the history of the John Sellers family according to your parents.
Thank you, Ruthie. I was born and raised and educated in the state of Arkansas. My parents were named Lowell and Mary Sellers. My father was a retailer and had his own dress and accessory store in the Central Mall there in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I went to school at Northside High School, played football, and went on to college, as most students did when they were young. Had a number of summer jobs that led me into a career of recreation, and I was blessed to find Grand Prairie and spend many years of my life working with the city in the Parks and Recreation Department.
All right. Now, let's get back to your mother's full name, including her maiden name. I believe we got your dad, but let's document one more time your mother's full name.
Mary Iris Sellers.
All right. Now, tell us about it. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I've got two sisters. One, Rebecca, is an older sister, and she still lives in Fort Smith and is a teacher in the Fort Smith school system and teaches adult education.
Oh, how wonderful.
My other sister, Elizabeth, is married and living in Sierra Madre, California, and is running my father's store by correspondence, so to speak, back and forth, and
yes,
has carried on the tradition in the retail business.
And is that still located in Fort Smith?
It's still located in Fort Smith.
And I believe you've lost both of your parents to death.
I have.
Yes. All right. And having a sister that really runs a business almost by osmosis, I think that's wonderful. But let's get back to the real John Sellers, growing up in Arkansas, and now we have a president of the United States from Arkansas. So you're coming from an illustrious background, but Fort Smith is not his territory, I don't believe. Tell us about John when he was a young man. Your dad operated this store. Were you involved in anything as a young person to help do the chores or anything around the store?
I was very heavily into sports. Like I said, I played football in school, and the school system didn't have a baseball program, but through the boys' clubs, I played a lot of other sports, including baseball and basketball, and spent most of my life, younger years, just kicking around in the boys' club system, which I guess was my initial indoctrination into the recreation business, even though I wasn't aware of it at the time. I worked part-time during the holidays for some extra spending money and that sort of thing with an uncle who had a dry goods store, and did everything from unload damaged freight at the freight salvage outlet that he operated to selling Christmas trees and just anything to make a little extra money and occupy some time.
All right. Would you name your grade school, and if you have a favorite teacher or someone in the elementary grades that was very important to you, would like for you to name drop?
Gosh, that's hard to think back that far.
It is.
I went to, first 5 years, went to Ballman Elementary School, and then in the 6th grade moved to a new school as we moved into a new residence, and it was in, the name of it was Fairview Elementary School. And we didn't pass grades and that sort of thing at that time, and the teacher of my 6th grade was Mrs. Hunter, and I fairly well remember that 6th grade experience and look back on it with a lot of favor.
Now, especially making that transition from a school where you had attended for 5 years, and here you are, whammo, into a new setting, and that's wonderful. All right, and then from there, of course, you proceeded on into either the middle school or the secondary schools. Other than sports, do you have any favorite things that you want to remember about your school?
I really can't think of anything. I was just really into sports, and
did you have a favorite sports coach or something that you'd like to remember?
I can recall the football coach when I was in junior high school, and that was my first experience with school sports. And he was a very slight man, but one that walked with a lot of authority. And I looked up to him and what he taught me about responsibility and being, I guess, a young man. And I look back with a lot of fond memories of Coach Malone, and he was the first one to put a pair of boxing gloves on me and
How wonderful.
put me in a ring, and I did that one time, and that was enough.
There's a lot of discipline to that, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
All righty, and graduating from Fort Smith, Arkansas, what year?
I graduated high school in 1963.
That was a good
And
year.
then moved on to my college education, starting out in the local community college and working part-time at my uncle's store. And then moving on to Arkansas Tech University for my last 2 years of my bachelor's degree in
what field?
In recreation and park administration.
Wonderful. You already knew when you got to your 3rd year in the university where you were going, didn't you?
I thought I was going to coach, and was in physical education originally, and ran across some students and some professors that were in the recreation curriculum. Was a brand new field at the time, and was excited about it and changed my major, and I'm glad I did. And
was there any one person that was really helpful in making you make this change or transition?
It was actually the last year that I was there. They had a new administration and a professor named David Reed. I was fortunate to get fairly familiar and had numerous long conversations with David, and was, I guess, my mentor as I pursued a professional career, and was blessed that I was able to have a professor such as David, and I'm glad that I made the change into recreation when I did.
So when our young people today have that to face and said, I've changed my major 3 or 4 times, that's perfectly all right, because you may not find your niche until that last year, right?
That's true, and it's going from a high school student into college. I don't think a whole lot of people are determined and have full conscious of what they want to do with their life as they go through their college years.
Coming out of Arkansas Tech, what happened to John then? What was the next step in your life?
I was fortunate to graduate in midterm, and
what year?
In '68, and went to a conference with the professors there at Arkansas Tech at Lake Texoma Lodge,
All right.
which still holds an annual conference to this day. And it was at that professional conference that I ran across, actually it was another Grand Prairiean that was the director of Parks and Recreation in Irving at the time, a guy named Bruce Waldo. And At that conference, I think I had 4 job offers and selected the job in Irving, Texas as their first parks planner, and came to Texas to begin my career in January of 1968.
1968 was a real turn of events, all the way from Arkansas to Lake Texoma, and 4 job offers. I think that's tremendous. And then 1968 to Irving, Texas. All right, as a planner there, what were your responsibilities and what came from that beginning career?
I can remember not having very much of a base map system that they had when I first came to Irving, and spent a considerable amount of my time just updating their mapping system, and designed a couple of projects that are still in place today, and one being the Arboretum that is located at the Irving Arts Center there on Highway 183.
That's great. All right, and then from Irving, what happened to Irving? Why aren't you still in Irving, young man?
I was in Irving only a few months.
All right.
And I ran across at a local meeting a guy named Don Kramer.
All right.
Who was the parks director at Grand Prairie at the time. And it was shortly after meeting Don that the position of Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation became open. And he offered me the position, and I came to Grand Prairie in 1969 as the Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation.
All right, and worked directly under his direction?
That's correct,
okay.
And very closely with the Park Board and somewhat with the City Council at that time. But,
would you like to bring to memory maybe some of those Parks Board members when you first started, or some of the people in the city, the council members that you have a good memory of, that we can put them into this record that you worked with?
Well, Kurt Wagner was the mayor at the time I came to Grand Prairie, and there were only 5 city council members at the time, which were called city commissioners.
Yeah.
And the park board's chairman was Bernie Weiner, Dr. Weiner, who had served somewhere close to 20 years as the chairman of the park board. And we worked, didn't have any money during those times, and we worked on a lot of sponsorships and smaller projects and improvements, and developed some programming that had not been available in Grand Prairie at that time.
Did you have any recreation centers per se at that time, or did you just operate in parks? Tell us a little bit about the beginnings.
I can remember first coming here, we worked out of our park maintenance crews, worked out of a little 2-car garage that was located in Lakeview, and was part of an urban renewal project that was going on at the time. And we had 5 maintenance employees back in '69, and we had I guess close to 1,000 acres of parkland. We had 2 recreation centers. One was Dalworth Recreation Center, which still exists today. It has been improved and enlarged, and the other center was Crockett Recreation Center. Crockett is now Charlie Taylor Recreation Center. And our department offices were located in one activity room and the kitchen at Crockett Recreation Center.
Oh, that's where your offices were located.
That was our administrative offices, or that's where Don and I both worked out of.
That's amazing. All right. And then from 1969, with these meager beginnings, with 5 employees and 2 rec centers that were small compared to what you have today, tell us just a little bit about the things that have passed during those years under your direction, and finally becoming Parks and Recreation Director. When did all of that happen?
Ruthie, I worked, I guess, as Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation for 10 years, and Mr. Kramer left to pursue a job in Austin, and I was named the Parks and Recreation Director. I guess it was in '79, and remained in that position through my retirement earlier this year. The system obviously grew from those meager and lean years, and was fortunate to have been involved in passing 3 park bond issues that allowed us to have some funding to develop some of our parks and facilities throughout the city. And one of the things that we tried very hard to do is to take those capital dollars through the bond program and solicit matching grants to maximize our funding capabilities for those projects.
These matching grants, are they state or federal or both?
They have been from the state level as well as the federal level, and some that were specifically geared towards parks and open space development, some block grant funds, any place that there was some available dollars.
That you could hustle money, wasn't it?
To improve our park system. We spent a lot of time doing that, and we're rewarded with literally millions of dollars worth of improvements that we've placed in our park system.
You have a splendid municipal golf course, a soccer complex second to none, a new golf course on the map, the linear park that is going through Kirby Creek area. Of all of the things that you've done or spearheaded or have brought to bear through these grants and your funds and the councils that you've worked with, what are your favorite, I would say, top 3?
Ruthie, one was actually not really a grant, but was done without city funds, and probably the very top project, and one that I felt gave the Parks and Recreation Department a lot of credibility and made the department closer to the community, was the first creative playground that was developed in C.P. Wagner Park. And as you well know, the architect Bob Leathers out of Ithaca, New York, was a very creative person that rather than the manufactured playground equipment, this was designed, and then the playground was actually constructed by citizens of our community. The materials and funds for that project came from the community, and so that was a project that I thought bonded our department with the community, and in some respect gave the department the credibility that helped the image of the services that we provide to the community. Another one would be, I guess, out of the 1984 park bond issue, being able to do actually 2 projects that stand out quite significantly. One being the development of the senior center on Conover Drive, and the second one being the development of the natatorium. 2 facilities that the community had not been exposed to or had available to it, and for a community our size, they're very excellent facilities that service a number of citizens, and I'm extremely proud of having initiated both of those projects. And then one project that's very close, I think, to both of us in the park areas was having the opportunity to apply for and receive national designation as Tree City USA, and that was a formal recognition that has been maintained on an annual basis, recognizing the program that we do in urban forestry. And there's very little that is more important in my mind towards the development of a park system than the planting and growing of trees and just you know, softening the landscape and using them as God intended, and that is to beautify various places.
Well, that was an exciting time for me. I was the state president of Keep Texas Beautiful at that time, and we brought to you our proposal that we needed to have the State Arbor Day ceremony in Grand Prairie, Texas. And you know, you didn't bat an eye. You said, let's do it. Oh, and came across like gangbusters, and it was a wonderful, but that's when we had Arbor Day in January, and it certainly was cold then.
That's right.
And so I'm always thankful to you that you helped bring into being our opportunity to do the State Arbor Day ceremony and to become a Tree City USA. And I've always said that you were the father and I was the mother of Arbor Day in Grand Prairie, Texas, as far as those state observances are concerned. And we have named Terry Jackson as our child because she really carried the ball for us for many years as a member of the tree board, and the board now is carrying on that. But now let's get into the mother and father prospects for John Sellers. You haven't mentioned your own personal family, and we have about 7 more minutes to go, but let's get that documented now, shall we?
I'll be happy to. I am currently married to my wife of, I guess now, 13 years, and her name is Jane Ann. Her maiden name was Jenkins. She and her family were from El Paso, and she went to Texas A&M University and graduated in recreation as well. And,
how wonderful.
Came to the Dallas area shortly after graduation. That's when I met her, and then we married. The most recent addition to my family is our new daughter, and Erin Elizabeth is her name, and Erin was born in last year on May 27th, and is just the joy of both our lives.
She certainly makes the difference, doesn't she?
She does, and all the things that we work so hard providing to the other children in the community, we can now benefit from with Erin.
Yes, and she can enjoy the playgrounds and all of these other good things. And you're getting to the point in about 10 years you'll be able to enjoy maybe the Senior Citizen Center and other things because you get to do that when you're 55.
All right.
That's wonderful. All right. Now, tell us a little bit more about working with the community with Parks and Recreation. I know you have a very touchy role to play, or you did have until your retirement, of getting along with all of the council members, yet getting along with all the people in the neighborhoods, keeping everything nice, and especially the greenhouse that you have was something that you haven't mentioned.
That's correct. I guess it was shortly after I came to Grand Prairie. We were fortunate enough to gain 3 or 4 maintenance positions, and 2 of those happened to have been gardener positions, and Helen McGahey and Gussie Cook were our original 2 gardeners that propagated and grew flowers out of a homemade greenhouse that originally was constructed at Kirby Creek, and was the meager beginnings of a horticulture program that we introduced to the park system way back in the early 70s. And from that program has grown, and we have beautified through landscape materials, everything from annual bedding plants all the way to huge trees, as you well know, during the various Arbor Day celebrations that have been added to the landscape in our park system and around our municipal buildings.
What do you forecast for Grand Prairie? The new golf course that you, I know, worked up to your ears in that one, and tell us anything else that might be forthcoming that you know of that you worked very diligently on before you decided you were going to retire and really take all these vacations.
Ruthie, I think one of the things that led to my decision to retire, other than after spending 25 years doing something, it's maybe time to try something else. I think Grand Prairie has a bright future, and its park system will continue to grow and will be an asset that cannot be measured in dollars or values, that every community needs to have, is their open space and recreational areas. And the future is bright. I think with the opening of the golf course, which was or is being done without the benefit of the bond funds that the city is out of right now. That was about the only project that was available for development using the revenues that will be generated off of that course. So there's going to be some lean years, I think, with the economy and without having those capital dollars to maintain pace of development with the park system. But after a few years that the economy turns around and this city can pass a very much needed park bond issue and get back on track, maintaining and preserving, expanding on its park system, particularly in South Grand Prairie, where the growth corridor is, and also where they're so deficient in parklands and are in very much need of some urban parks.
Two of my most favorite ones of your projects, the State of Texas sculpture, and also the many other wonderful things that you've done to help the garden clubs and the people in Grand Prairie, Texas, to help you to maintain some of those. And we have about a half minute left, and I'd like for you to spend that looking out into your camera and telling young people that the choice that you have made was a good career, and you have to do that in 30 seconds.
Ruthie, I think it is. There's no greater pleasure that one can derive than to see the fruits of your labor being enjoyed by so many citizens. And I've not been one that have had a lot of murals and satisfaction through rewards other than the reward that I get or have received by seeing others enjoy the fruits of your labor. And it's a very rewarding career, and one that gives you the opportunity to work with many, many fine people and citizens, and I've enjoyed it very much.
John Sellers, we're looking forward to getting an update on whatever you do in your third career, because it's going to be wonderful to see what's happening to John Sellers. I want to thank you for this wonderful interview.
Thank you, Ruthie. It's been my pleasure.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.